She slapped me so hard I almost dropped the baby gift in my hand. I didn't stumble. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. The sting on my cheek was sharp but clean, like it had been waiting years to land. Around me, the room froze. No one reached out. No one gasped. They just stared as if violence between sisters was something too awkward to interfere with. The cake still had her name on it, 3 tiers of white frosting and pink ribbons spelling out Laura's little miracle. It tilted slightly from the vibration of the slap. I wondered if it would fall. It didn't. Neither did I. Laura stood in front of me, eyes blazing belly round, with her second child hand still raised as if expecting applause. Her voice shook as she hissed, "You don't get to ruin this day. Not again." And just like that, the crowd returned to her side like moths to her heat. I slowly turned my head toward the front door. The handle moved. It clicked open. A woman in a gray blazer stepped inside, calm, composed, holding a clipboard and wearing a CPS badge clipped to her chest. Child Protective Services. Her voice was low but firm. "Miss Laura, I need to speak with you about your daughter, Emma." The silence that followed was louder than the slap, and that's when I knew I didn't need to raise my voice. I had already set the room on fire. The truth is, I didn't come to this baby shower to make peace. I didn't show up because I believed we could be a family again. I came because someone had to stop the cycle. I came because I saw bruises on Emma's wrist 2 months ago and no one listened. I came because my mother told me not to cause drama. I came because Emma deserved someone to show up and stay. And now, as the CPS agent stepped farther into the room and heads began to turn, I realized this moment wasn't about me anymore. It never had been. It was about every time Laura screamed at that child and called it discipline. Every time she slammed a door hard enough to shake the frame and called it parenting. Every time Emma flinched when someone raised a hand near her. No one else would say it, so I did. Not with words, but with action. Laura's face shifted from fury to confusion to fear. She looked from me to the agent, then back again. I recognized that look. It was the same one I used to wear when I was her age, standing in the hallway of our childhood home, trying to explain away bruises on my own arms to teachers who never asked twice. She had inherited the rage. I had inherited the silence. But not anymore. I watched her lips part, looking for something defense denial, an excuse, but she found none. The room held its breath. The agent walked past me without a glance, her focus locked on Laura, who instinctively stepped back. "You can't be serious," Laura said, her voice rising. "This is a baby shower." Her laugh was sharp, panicked. "You people are sick." But the agent didn't flinch. "I'm not here for cake, ma'am. I'm here for your daughter. She's safe, and we have concerns about ongoing emotional and potential physical neglect. We've been observing. Today is for paperwork." Laura looked to our mother sitting near the gift table. The woman who used to say blood is thicker than truth. Her eyes widened. "Do something," she barked. "Tell them they're wrong." But Mom just sat there, hands in her lap, mouth pressed in a thin line. Not a word. Not this time. I stood in the exact center of that room. Everyone was looking, but no one really saw me. That had been the story of my life. Not this time. This time, they would see everything. The scars, the choices, the woman who walked away from a broken family only to return stronger, louder, unafraid. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything that mattered when I filed the report. The rest was just fallout. Now it begins. The last time anyone in that room used my name, I was still being called dramatic, over-emotional, the troublemaker. That's the word my mother loved most, troublemaker. I was 10 when she first said it, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed while I cried and tried to explain that Laura had slammed my fingers in the bedroom door. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She just asked why I was always trying to ruin things. That became the rhythm of my life. Laura would scream, throw things, break a window, and I'd be the one sent to my room for making noise. I learned to go quiet early. I learned not to flinch when things crashed. I learned to apologize for bruises I didn't cause. By the time I was 16, I knew how to hide a cracked rib with a hoodie and how to clean blood from a carpet before Mom got home. Laura never apologized. Not once. She cried instead, and every time she cried, the world stopped to hold her. I wasn't held. I was told to hold it in. Years passed. I left. Not out of anger, but out of instinct, like an animal that finally chews through its own leg to escape a trap. I moved to another state, changed my number, didn't look back. But silence isn't freedom when it's shaped by fear. I still had to call every Christmas, still sent cards on birthdays. Not because I was welcomed, but because not doing so meant more accusations. Selfish, ungrateful, abandoning family. So I complied, quietly, always quietly. Until the day I got the call from Emma's preschool teacher. She was a friend from my high school days, someone who didn't know the whole story, but remembered enough to ask questions when Emma started showing up withdrawn quiet, and once with a bruise she claimed came from falling off a chair. The bruise was shaped like a thumbprint. That was the moment I realized silence doesn't protect anyone. It only extends the abuse. I drove 3 hours that day, parked down the street from Laura's apartment, and watched from the car. I saw Emma through the window, sitting on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest. Laura walked back and forth, yelling into the phone, pointing, pacing. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. I'd heard it all my life. That kind of anger doesn't end with words. I started documenting everything: photos, times, days. I wasn't stalking. I was collecting proof. Proof no one had collected for me. But it came at a cost. Every photo was a memory I'd buried. Every moment was a wound reopened. And still, I hesitated. I waited. I told myself I needed more, until I overheard Emma ask, "Why doesn't Auntie live with us?" And Laura said, "Because she lies. And if you lie like her, you'll be alone too." That night, I filed the report. It took me 4 hours to write it. I cried once. Not for Laura, not for my mother. For the girl I used to be, the one who never got this chance. Filing that report didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like breath, like finally being allowed to exhale. But even then, I knew it wouldn't be clean. Laura would deny it. Mom would defend her. The family would circle the wagons like they always did. I wasn't trying to be believed. I was trying to stop a story from repeating. When the CPS agent called me a week later, she said, "Thank you for your courage." And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, seen. Not watched, not tolerated. Seen. But I also knew what was coming. I knew what walking into that baby shower meant. I knew the cost. They'd hate me louder than they ever ignored me. They'd say I ruined the family, that I was jealous, bitter. That's the price you pay for holding a mirror to people who only ever loved their own reflection. I paid it, in full. Because Emma's silence was starting to sound like mine, and I couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not ever. Laura was born screaming. Not the kind of scream that comes with new lungs, but the kind that demands attention and never stops. I was 5 when she arrived, and I remember the way my mother held her like a fragile gem, whispering things like, "She's sensitive," and "She's different." Like, that was a warning, not a comfort. From the very beginning, Laura was the sun in our house. Everything revolved around her moods, her needs, her breakdowns. And me, I became the moon, reflecting whatever light was left, careful not to eclipse. I learned early that Laura's pain always came first. If she cried, the world adjusted. If I cried, I was told to get over it. When Laura pushed me down the stairs and I fractured my wrist, Mom told the ER nurse I had slipped. When Laura took my birthday money from Grandma and said I lost it, Mom scolded me for accusing my sister. And when Laura scratched her own face and told the school I did it, I spent 2 weeks suspended while she got ice cream in sympathy. No one questioned her. No one dared. My father left when I was 9. I don't blame him now. I used to, but not anymore. He tried to discipline Laura once, just once, and Mom threatened to leave him. So instead, he left us both. I didn't cry when he drove away. I just felt relief for him. He never looked back. Laura became worse after that. Mood swings sharp as razors, tantrums that broke furniture, screams that made the neighbors knock on the door more than once. But somehow it was always someone else's fault. School stress, hormones, bad influences. Never her. And always, always, Mom protected her. Mom had a way of turning every incident into a defense. "She's just high-spirited. You're just being difficult. Don't provoke her." By the time Laura was a teenager, I had stopped speaking unless spoken to. There was no room in that house for more than one voice, and Laura's voice filled every corner. She drank at 16, crashed a borrowed car at 17, got pregnant at 21, and each time I watched my mother clean up her mess with the efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Laura was never punished. She was protected, and every mistake became a new excuse for why the family had to rally around her. Even when Emma was born and Laura didn't come home from the hospital for 2 days because she needed space, Mom kept saying, "She's trying her best." I knew better. I saw how Laura looked at Emma not with love, but with burden. I watched her snap when the baby cried too long, disappear for hours, and leave the infant with whoever was around. Often Mom, sometimes me if I happened to visit. The first time I saw Emma flinch at her mother's voice, I felt the chill of déjà vu. That same stiffness I had learned, that pause, that breath-holding instinct that never quite goes away. I tried to bring it up gently. Once, I said, "Maybe she needs more structure." Laura laughed in my face. "Maybe you need to mind your own business." And Mom, as always, echoed, "Don't cause trouble. You know how Laura gets." That line had followed me my whole life, like I was the spark and Laura the explosion, like my job was to never light the match. But Emma wasn't me, and I wasn't a child anymore. So I stopped asking permission. I started watching. Not spying. Watching. Documenting. Because if no one else was going to say it, if no one else was going to believe me, I had to build something they couldn't ignore. But even that decision came with guilt, because no matter how much damage she caused, a piece of me still wanted to believe Laura could change, that our mother would finally see her clearly. That blood could mean something other than silence. But some families don't break. They rot. Slowly, quietly, from the inside out. And by the time you smell the truth, it's already poisoned everything. That baby shower wasn't a celebration. It was a monument to denial. Every banner, every cupcake, every compliment thrown at Laura like she was a survivor, not a storm. And I knew if I didn't stop it now, Emma would grow up thinking survival meant staying small and silent, like I did, and I couldn't let that be her inheritance. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope, thick paper gold lettering, the kind that pretends to speak of elegance but only covers rot. It was hand-delivered by our mother. She knocked on my door one Sunday afternoon, unannounced, wearing her pearls like armor. When I opened the door, she smiled too widely, the kind of smile that had always meant manipulation. I stood in the doorway, blocking her view of my home, a quiet apartment filled with calm, something she had never valued. She handed me the envelope and said, "It would mean a lot to Laura if you came." Then she turned and walked away before I could answer, her heels clicking like a warning. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the counter for 2 days, unopened, untouched, like it might dissolve on its own. When I finally opened it, the card inside read, "You're invited to celebrate baby Cole." A second miracle. My stomach turned. A second miracle, as if the first had come without bruises and therapy. I thought of Emma, barely 5, already learning how to fade into corners when voices rose. I thought of Laura's threats, her outbursts, her silence followed by manipulation. And I thought of the photos in my file, bruises screaming isolation. I considered throwing the card away. But then I thought about Emma again, about how much damage had already been done, and how much more could come with another child in that house. I couldn't stay away. I told myself I was going to keep the peace, to blend and observe, confirm what I already knew. But a part of me also knew this wasn't a visit. It was a confrontation in disguise. When I arrived at the baby shower, the house looked the same as it always had. Fresh flowers by the walkway, manicured lawn, the illusion of perfection. Inside, it smelled of lemon polish and catered pastries. There were balloons in pastel colors, a table filled with gifts, and a banner that said, "Welcome, baby girl." Women from the neighborhood gathered in clusters, laughing too loud, ignoring the tension that buzzed beneath the surface. I was greeted with polite smiles and cold eyes. No one hugged me. No one asked how I was. Laura looked surprised when she saw me. Her smile was too slow, her eyes scanning me like I was a threat. I handed her the gift bag without speaking. She took it, nodded once, and walked away. I found a seat near the back where I could see everything. Laura floated from group to group, soaking up compliments, performing motherhood like a role she had memorized but never internalized. Emma sat alone on the staircase, quietly sipping juice from a plastic cup. No one spoke to her. No one noticed when she flinched as her mother passed by. I watched. I waited. At one point, our mother approached me and said, "Don't start anything. Just let Laura have this day." Her voice was low but sharp. I nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. I wasn't here to start anything. I was here to finish it. Then came the moment. Laura was opening gifts, narrating each item like a game show host. Someone asked her if Emma was excited to be a big sister. Laura rolled her eyes and said, "She's 5. What does she know? Probably jealous already." A few people laughed. Emma looked down at her cup. My hands clenched under the table. Still, I waited. Then she opened my gift, a simple baby blanket I had knitted myself. She held it up and said, "Oh, wow," from the childless aunt. A few people chuckled nervously. Then she looked straight at me and added, I guess she finally contributed something other than judgment." That's when the air shifted. My cheeks burned, but I stayed still. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And that's what made her furious. The slap wasn't planned. It was impulse, desperation. She stood, stormed over, and hit me so fast no one had time to react. The room went silent. And that's when the front door opened. The front door creaked open like it had rehearsed the timing. And in stepped the woman I had met 2 weeks prior in a government building with peeling paint and flickering lights. She wore the same gray blazer, the same neutral face, but now her presence cut through the pastel decor like a knife. She paused, scanned the room, and locked eyes with Laura, who was still frozen mid-gesture, her hand slightly raised from the slap. No one said a word. The silence was sharp electric, like the breath you hold before the crash. The CPS agent stepped forward and said clearly, "Miss Laura, we need to speak with you about your daughter." Laura blinked once, then turned to our mother, eyes wide, seeking instruction. Mom rose slowly, clutching her purse, and said, "This isn't the time." The agent didn't even glance her way. "Actually, ma'am, it is." She gestured to the hallway. Laura didn't move. I watched the panic build behind her eyes like storm clouds. Then came the lie, because of course it did. She said, "I don't know what this is about. Emma is fine. She's a happy, healthy child. She even laughed this morning." The agent nodded like she'd heard it all before. "We're aware of what you've claimed, but we've received multiple reports over several months, and after our most recent interviews and evidence collection, we are officially intervening." The room gasped, not in horror, but in discomfort. The kind that creeps in when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Laura's hands shook. She turned to the room and said, "This is absurd. Someone's trying to ruin my life." She looked at me like the accusation alone would burn me, and I stood still, arms by my sides, face unreadable. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The agent continued, "Emma is currently with a temporary guardian. You are not permitted to contact her directly until we complete our assessment." Another gasp. My mother's voice cracked as she said, "This is a family matter. We handle things privately." But the agent didn't flinch. Not when Mom stepped forward. Not when Laura started crying. Not when one of the neighbors asked if this was all just a misunderstanding. There are no misunderstandings when a 5-year-old says she's scared to go home. The words landed like a stone through stained glass. People shifted in their chairs. Some stood. A few left the room entirely. Laura's performance faltered. Her tears turned ugly. She yelled, "This is my child. You can't just take her. I'm her mother." But the agent calmly held up a document. "Emergency custody signed by a judge this morning. It gives us the right to remove her from the home until further notice." At that moment, Laura stopped crying. Her face collapsed into a blankness I recognized. The same expression she wore as a child when she'd broken something beyond repair. She looked around and realized no one was defending her anymore. Not even Mom. Especially not Mom. Because Mom wasn't just silent now, she looked smaller, older, like someone who had spent too long believing silence was strength only to realize it had protected nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I stood steady, unblinking, as Laura's world cracked open in front of her. Because this wasn't revenge. This was reality. And for the first time, it belonged to the child who had been ignored, not the one who screamed the loudest. Laura finally whispered, "You did this." Her voice wasn't accusing. It was almost confused. I met her eyes. "No, you did. I just refused to keep pretending." And that was it. No more words. No more performance. Just a room full of people forced to see what they had ignored for years. The woman they called sensitive. The child they said was spirited. The mother they applauded. None of it survived the truth, and in that stillness I realized the illusion had finally shattered. 2 weeks before the slap, before the CPS badge sliced through the air like a blade, I had sat across from Agent Herrera in a plain office that smelled of cheap coffee and bureaucracy. Her desk was neat, her tone cautious the way professionals speak when they know the stories they hear carry weight too heavy for the room. She didn't blink as I slid over the file I had assembled over 3 months, photos of fading bruises, transcripts of screaming audio I recorded from outside Laura's apartment door, a screenshot of Emma's textless drawings from school that showed dark corners and figures with wide eyes. Herrera flipped through the file with clinical focus, nodding slowly. At one point, she said, "Most of our cases come too late." I asked her if I was too early. She looked up serious. "No, you're right on time." I remember exhaling like I hadn't realized I'd been holding breath for years. She told me they would begin a shadow observation, that they couldn't act on my report alone, but they would send people. Quietly. Soft inquiries to teachers, neighbors, even the pediatrician. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. What I needed was movement. Herrera promised that if what I said held up, action would follow. And it did. I received a call 3 days before the baby shower. Herrera again. Her voice calm, firmer now. "We're proceeding with emergency action. We'll be serving a temporary custody order on the day of the event. It's the only time we can be sure everyone will be present." Her words settled like cement. She asked, "Will you be there?" I hesitated. Said, "Yes." But it didn't feel like agreement. It felt like surrender. I spent the next 2 days unable to sleep. Not out of guilt, out of fear that it might not be enough. That somehow, Laura would talk her way out again, that our mother would step in, soften the facts, reframe the narrative. But the moment I saw Herrera at that door, I knew the system had chosen truth. People talk about CPS like a villain, like a bureaucratic beast that snatches children for sport. But I saw something different. I saw a woman walking into a room full of denial and saying, "Enough." No apology, no pretense, just fact. And I saw what it did to Laura, not just the consequence, but the recognition. She had been protected for so long, shielded by blood, defended by silence. She never expected a force stronger than family. But that's what Herrera represented. The moment when a society stops trusting secrets and starts trusting the child. That's what people forget. CPS isn't perfect. No system is. But when it works like a scalpel. It cuts precisely, deliberately, and only when necessary. I knew the second Emma was removed from that house, she had a chance at something I never did. Safety backed by law. Advocacy with teeth. Protection that doesn't apologize for being loud. After the event, Herrera and I met again, this time in a neutral cafe where everything smelled like cinnamon and the tables were too close together. She told me Emma had been placed with a vetted temporary guardian, someone trained to handle trauma exposure in children. I asked if I could see her. She said not yet. Legally, things needed to settle, but she added, "Emma asked about you." My throat tightened. What did she say? She asked if you were the one who told the truth. I nodded, unable to speak. Herrera continued, "It's going to be hard. The mother will fight. There will be hearings. Probably media. It won't be over quickly." I looked her in the eye and said, "It doesn't need to be easy. It just needs to be real." She smiled, the kind that comes from respect, not pity. That's when I knew this wasn't just my story anymore. It was hers too. Emma's. And maybe through her, a dozen more like her, because systems only work when someone dares to engage them. And I had finally dared. Not for revenge, for redemption, not for the past, for the future. I didn't plan to stand in front of the entire room. I didn't script it or rehearse anything. But when the CPS agent finished her statement and Laura's sobs started to echo across the walls, I knew I had to step forward, not to humiliate her, but to fill the space that had always silenced me. I walked past the folding chairs, the untouched cupcakes, the relatives pretending to be invisible, and stopped just beside Herrera, who nodded once and stepped aside. I faced them, not just Laura and our mother, but the entire gallery of enablers, the neighbors who ignored the screams, the friends who laughed when Laura mocked Emma's emotions, the ones who clapped for the curated motherhood she wore like a costume. I looked at all of them and said, "This isn't sudden. This isn't cruel. This is overdue." You all watched her spiral. You all smiled through it. You said, "That's just Laura. She's fiery. She's stressed." You excused every bruise, every scream, every door slammed in that child's face. And when I tried to tell the truth, you told me I was the one who needed help. I paused. No one interrupted. Not even Mom, who sat with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed somewhere above my head. I continued. Emma didn't ask for this. She didn't lie. She didn't perform. She didn't hide behind excuses. She's 5. She told the truth because she thought someone might finally listen. I did. And now, so has the law. Laura let out a strangled laugh from behind me. You're just bitter. You never forgave me. I turned to her. Forgiveness requires accountability. You never gave it. And I stopped waiting. I faced the room again. You can all pretend this is a betrayal, but the real betrayal is allowing a child to be scared in her own home and doing nothing. The betrayal is silence. I won't carry it anymore. A few people shifted in their seats. Some wouldn't meet my eyes. One woman dabbed her cheek with a napkin. And Mom, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply sat her face unreadable, her body rigid like a statue carved from denial. When I was done, I didn't ask for applause. I didn't wait for reactions. I walked back to my seat, slowly, deliberately, every step echoing with a kind of resolve I hadn't felt in years. Herrera leaned in slightly and whispered, "That was brave." I shook my head. That was necessary. Afterward, I stayed behind as people trickled out. Laura was escorted to a private room with Herrera to begin the intake process. Mom didn't speak to me. She left without saying goodbye, her heels quieter this time. The illusion had cracked, and there was nothing left to defend. I stood in the kitchen and looked around. The decorations still hung. The cake still stood. But the air was different now, lighter in some places, heavier in others. I had spoken not for vengeance, but for justice. Not to hurt Laura, but to stop the hurt from spreading. And I realized something then. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to step back. I wasn't the sister who ruined the party. I was the woman who finally stopped the performance. And for once, that was enough. Laura didn't go quietly. That was never her style. The next day, she posted a long message on social media filled with flowery language about betrayal sisters turning against sisters and how motherhood is judged too harshly by those who've never experienced it. She called me controlling, bitter, obsessed. She said the CPS investigation was fueled by lies and jealousy. Her followers, most of them distant acquaintances who only knew the polished version of her life, flooded the comments with sympathy. "Stay strong, Mama. Haters always try to dim your light." I read every word, and I didn't respond. Not publicly. I didn't have to. The court order had already been signed. The evidence was already filed. And Emma was already safe. Let Laura scream into the void. The truth no longer needed volume. What followed were weeks of hearings. Laura's lawyer argued she was a misunderstood mother doing her best. But when the recordings played in court, Emma sobbing behind a closed door while Laura shouted threats, the courtroom grew still. When the pediatrician confirmed repeated injuries with inconsistent explanations, the defense stopped objecting. When Emma's teacher took the stand and shared that the child had drawn pictures of herself locked in a closet, the judge's face hardened. And when I testified, quiet, steady, factual, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I recited what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I had documented. I ended my testimony with one sentence: I'm not here to punish my sister. I'm here to protect her daughter. That was all I needed to say. The ruling came faster than expected. Temporary custody became long-term guardianship. Laura was mandated to complete a full psychological evaluation, parenting courses, and bi-weekly supervised visitation. Even then, nothing was guaranteed. She stormed out of the courtroom before the judge finished reading the final statement. My mother didn't attend the last hearing. She sent a text instead. I hope you're proud. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't proud. I was tired. I was raw. But I was resolute. The fallout spread quickly. Neighbors stopped calling. Some relatives cut contact entirely, but others quietly reached out. One aunt sent a message that read, I'm sorry I didn't believe you when you were young. I believe you now. Another older cousin called just to say thank you. I didn't need the apologies. I didn't crave validation, but I understood their silence had always been survival too. We had all been trained to orbit around Laura's rage. Now they were learning to stop spinning. The final sign that things had truly changed came 3 weeks later. I picked Emma up from school. She ran to me, arms open, backpack bouncing. She said, Auntie, do I have to go back yet? I knelt down and said, Not until you're safe. And you are safe now. She nodded like she understood something bigger than words. That night, she asked if she could sleep in my room. I told her yes. She curled up under the covers and whispered, Do you think she misses me? I hesitated, then said, I think she misses what she could control. Not you. Emma didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and held my hand until she fell asleep. That was the price Laura paid, not court orders or visitation limits, but the quiet understanding that the person she thought belonged to her had been reclaimed by truth. And truth doesn't return what it saves, not to those who burned it. Laura had lost her stage, her spotlight, her audience. What remained was accountability, and that was a show she could never headline. The first night Emma called me Mom by accident, I didn't correct her. It wasn't because I wanted the title. It was because I understood what she meant. She wasn't confusing roles. She was identifying safety, comfort, someone who tucked her in without yelling, someone who made lunch and remembered no strawberries because they made her throat itchy, someone who didn't forget. That word Mom had always lived in Laura's mouth like a weapon, a label she wielded for control, not connection. But for Emma, it was a whisper of relief, a sign that she had found a place where love didn't require silence. Over time, my apartment shifted. The once quiet space became a home filled with small chaos markers without caps, stuffed animals tucked into corners, shoes always out of place. But in that mess was a kind of peace I had never known. Emma laughed more. She stopped jumping at loud sounds. She started humming while brushing her teeth. I noticed that first and smiled. Then came the conversations. I like it here, she said one evening while we watched cartoons. It's calm. You listen to me. I nodded and held her closer. You deserve that. Every day. But something deeper stirred in me too. Caring for Emma wasn't just about her healing. It was about mine. I had spent my entire life thinking survival was the end goal, just getting out, just staying afloat. But now I was learning that survival is only the beginning. Living starts when you stop bracing for impact. I started going to therapy. For the first time. I told a woman named Dr. Renner about the time I hid in the closet while Laura screamed at Mom, and Mom told me to stay hidden so Laura could cool down. I told her how I used to sit in the bathtub with the water running just to drown out the sound of the walls shaking, and how even now I sometimes flinched at sudden noises. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush me. She said, That was trauma, and you were conditioned to carry it alone, but you're not alone anymore. I cried that day, not because I was sad, because someone finally named what I had been carrying. At home, Emma and I created rituals. Pancakes on Saturdays. No phones at dinner. We planted tomatoes on the windowsill and named the biggest one Steve. On bad days, we drew monsters on paper and ripped them up. On good days, we danced barefoot in the living room. I wasn't perfect. There were moments I felt overwhelmed, guilty for not being able to give her a backyard, guilty for raising another woman's child, guilty for how long it had taken me to act. But then Emma would hug me without warning and say, "You're my safe place." And in that moment, every guilt fractured into gratitude. My name wasn't on any birth certificate, but I was rebuilding something stronger than legal ties. I was building trust. One night, I found an old photo tucked between two books, a picture of me at 15 standing at a school event, arms crossed, eyes wary. I almost didn't recognize myself. So guarded, so dimmed. I set the photo next to a new one, me and Emma at the park, sunlight in our hair, both of us mid-laugh. The contrast wasn't just in light. It was in life. I had reclaimed myself. Not the girl from before, but the woman who came after. The one who didn't apologize for seeing too much. The one who stood up even when her voice wasn't welcome. And in doing so, I gave Emma the blueprint for her own freedom. I wasn't her mother by blood, but I was her mirror. And through her eyes, I became visible to myself again. Not as the forgotten sister, not as the silent child, but as someone who chose to stay and fight. Not to win, to protect, not to punish, to restore. Emma didn't just get rescued. We both did. Together. When the court finalized guardianship, I didn't cry in the courthouse. I waited until we got home, until Emma was upstairs changing into pajamas, humming something I didn't recognize. I sat on the couch clutching the papers like they weighed more than paper should. It wasn't just custody, it was a contract with myself. A promise that the silence ends with me. That Emma will grow up knowing she is heard, believed, protected. That she doesn't have to earn love by shrinking. That her voice is not dangerous. I folded the documents and placed them in a drawer beneath the old photo of me at 15 and the newer one of us at the park. Then I stood, walked into the kitchen, and began to write. Not a diary. A guide. A set of letters to Emma for the future. The first one said, "If anyone ever tells you to stay quiet for the sake of family, remember that safety matters more than tradition." The second said, "Your worth is not up for negotiation." And the third simply said, "I see you. Always." We built a new life slowly, carefully. I enrolled Emma in a different school where she didn't have to explain anything. I signed her up for art classes. I joined a local parenting support group where most of the members assumed I was her mother. I didn't correct them. I just listened, shared, and allowed myself to belong. One day, the group leader asked if I'd be willing to speak about intervention, about what happens when a family member steps in. I hesitated, then agreed. I told our story. I didn't use names. I didn't dramatize it. I spoke plainly. They listened. A man in the back cried. A woman came up after and said, "I wish my sister had done what you did. You saved her." I shook my head. No, we saved each other. That phrase stayed with me. I used it when I spoke to a group of teachers at Emma's school about how to spot warning signs. I used it again when I was invited to write an op-ed for the local paper about mandated reporting and how families shouldn't be exempt from accountability. Each time I shared, I wasn't reliving the pain. I was reclaiming the power that had always been stolen by silence. Emma asked once, "Why do you tell people about it?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "Because someone out there might be you, and someone out there might be me, and they both deserve a chance to be safe." She thought about that, then nodded. "Okay, just make sure they know I'm okay now, that you helped me." I smiled and promised. The truth is, Emma helped me too. She gave my life a new compass, not revenge, not vindication, just purpose, the kind that builds something instead of burning it down, the kind that outlasts the shame others tried to leave behind. I used to think family was sacred, untouchable. That blood meant forgiveness, no matter the crime. But I learned that real family is made through protection, not permission. Through presence. Through saying, "I see you, and I will not let you be hurt, even if it means being the villain in someone else's story." That's how cycles end. Not in dramatic finales, but in consistent acts of courage. Like reporting. Like staying. like refusing to lie. One night, Emma and I stood on the balcony watching stars. She said, "Do you think my mom misses me?" I answered honestly, "I think she misses the power, but not the responsibility." And then I added, "That's not your fault." She nodded again. She always did that when she understood something too big for her age. A quiet acknowledgement, a seed planted. We went back inside. She crawled into bed. I tucked her in and kissed her forehead. She whispered, "I love you." I whispered it back, and that was it. No parade, no audience. Just the soft truth of a new legacy beginning in silence, not from suppression, but from peace. And as I turned off the light, I knew this was the story I was always meant to write. Not on paper. In her life. In mine. In the space we created that says, the hurt ends here. It ends with us.